We're breaking back in to head to Annapolis in Maryland, where the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is speaking now to the media. Let's just listen in.
To the region in this job. A big part of that trip was with Secretary Austin. We did 2+2s with the Philippines and with Japan. I was at ASEAN with Foreign Minister Wong. We were together also for the Quad meetings in Japan. At the heart of our work in the Indo-Pacific is our alliance with Australia. Today, yet another step forward in deepening, strengthening that alliance. President Biden has called it an anchor for peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and around the world. It's enduring, more than 70 years, and our countries working together have made our people a little bit more free, more secure, more prosperous. But just over the past 3.5 years, I believe we've made the relationship stronger than it's ever been. We've enhanced our defense cooperation, including expanded marine rotations through Darwin. We created AUKUS with the UK to bolster regional and global security, to turbocharge our defense industrial bases. We have the first cohort of Australian workers who just arrived in Pearl Harbor for training and maintenance on nuclear-powered submarines. And we continue to broaden the scope of our partnership, from collaboration on advanced AI and quantum to combating disinformation. When Prime Minister Albanese and President Biden were last together, they talked about and agreed on plans to really advance what we call an innovation alliance. They inaugurated this during the state visit in October, and they continue, and we continue to elevate science, technology, and clean energy collaboration as a fundamental part of the work that we're doing together. Through our Critical Minerals Task Force, we're strengthening supply chains for components that are essential to electric vehicles, to batteries, to solar panels, many of the things that will be at the heart of the 21st century economy, and they're also critical to combating climate change. Over the past just 2.5 years, the U.S. has invested more than $5 billion in Australia for critical minerals. Yesterday, we also announced a partnership using satellite imagery to better manage natural resources and to help us tackle climate change. Throughout OSPIN, we also discussed threats to our shared vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific, a region that's stable, that's peaceful, that's prosperous, where sovereignty and international law are respected, where human rights are promoted and protected. We agreed on the importance of maintaining peace and stability in the South China Seas, the East China Seas, and countering any attempts at coercion. We're united on the need to maintain peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and to resist any actions that escalate tensions or undermine the status quo. We're also committed to deepening, strengthening the architecture that upholds this shared vision for the region and working more and more with other allies, with other partners to advance the shared vision that we have. We've been enhancing our cooperation with Pacific Island countries. We're taking, of course, the next steps on AUKUS. We're advancing an affirmative agenda for the Quad, where Penny and I were just engaged a few days ago. We reaffirmed the importance also of bridging the Indo-Pacific and the transatlantic theaters. Very grateful that Australia is the largest non-NATO military contributor to Ukraine, providing air defense capabilities to helping train Ukrainian personnel in the United Kingdom. Fundamentally, we agree with Prime Minister Albanese that, as he put it, ours is an alliance with a bright future because it's an alliance for a better future. Lloyd and I are both incredibly grateful to Penny and Richard for their partnership and for their friendship. Penny.
Thank you very much. Can I first thank Secretary Blinken, Tony and Secretary Austin, Lloyd for hosting Richard and I at this remarkable facility on these beautiful grounds, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be here. If I may first start with to read. I
know the Australian Foreign Minister also repeating her thanks to her American hosts there for their support and partnership. Let's bring in Patty Culhane, who joins us now from Washington, D.C. We were also expecting Secretary Blinken at some stage to be talking about tensions in the Middle East, but of course that is a meeting with the Australians about their safety relationship in Asia Pacific?
As things sometimes happen in television, I believe we had just gone to a break when the Secretary of State Antony Blinken had just started talking about it and really reiterating much of what we heard from him. He did say that U.S. President Joe Biden spoke to the President of Egypt, the Emir of Qatar, and that they are trying to work on a way to de-escalate the situation. I believe he also said that the U.S. message is no one should escalate the situation, and they've communicated that directly to Iran and to Israel. The U.S. doesn't really have any sort of arrangement to speak with Iranian officials. They usually go through the Swiss. So we're going to wait and see exactly what kind of communications have taken place. But this is what we've heard from the U.S. consistently since that attack, is that they are concerned that there is going to be an escalation. That's why you've seen them send another aircraft carrier, more fighter jets to the region, because the U.S. has said it will defend Israel if it is in fact attacked. So signaling out that Iran also must not escalate it, but also Israel. That seems somewhat significant. But again, the big question is going to be when they take questions. Usually at these things, it's 2 questions from Australian journalists and 2 from U.S. journalists. So of course, we'll monitoring to see if he expounds on that any further.
Of course, we'll come back to you, Patty, if and when that does happen. Patty Culhane there for us in Washington, D.C. Thank you. Let's stay in Washington, D.C. We can join Rich Utzon. He's a geopolitical consultant and non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Good to have you with us at the moment. It does seem to be the relationship between the US and Israel at the moment is that Israel seems to be outstepping the US, and the US is having to follow because of this ironclad support. That's not only creating tensions in the US, but we can see the tension it's creating in the Middle East.
Well, that's right. And it's good to be with you. I think actually the ramifications of the U.S.-Israel relationship are playing out even in domestic politics. We saw today that Kamala Harris, instead of picking Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who in many circles was considered a more formidable sort of running mate against the Trump and Vance ticket, chose to go with Tim Walz from Minnesota. And many people think that this was as a result of pressure about Shapiro's strong support for Israel previously. So this relationship between the United States and Israel is sui generis. It's unique. It plays out in terms of how both the geopolitics and the domestic politics of both countries kind of play out there. So I don't know. It's hard to say now, especially with the recent attacks that we saw in Lebanon and in Tehran involving assassination of sort of Hamas and Hezbollah leadership. How this is all going to play out? Is there going to be a war? Is there going to be an escalation? How will it play out in politics in Israel and in the United States and in the Palestinian Authority? It's a fascinating time.
OK, let's just take one bit at a time then as well then, Rich, because now we always know that the Americans have military hardware in the Mediterranean, normally sort of a fleet carrier of some shape or form that is already there. We know that. But there are these extra troops going in, and we know that there are senior military officials in Israel right now preparing for said imminent attack by Iran and its allies, potentially. It all seems to be building up, but it's also a holding pattern, and that holding pattern is making Israel very nervous right now.
Well, it's a very interesting two-step game. In the sense that the Biden administration and Washington in general right now are sympathetic to the suffering of the Palestinians and anxious to put an end to the fighting in Gaza, and therefore putting pressure on Netanyahu and saying, hey, go slow here and wrap this up as quickly as you can. But trying at the same time on the second level of this game, which is an Iran-Israel geopolitical rivalry regionally, to say, Iran, don't mistake the fact that the current administration has sympathy for the suffering of the Palestinian people for a carte blanche for you to do what you want to do regionally. It's within Washington, both Democrats and Republicans are firmly aligned with the idea that Israel is under direct threat from Iran, and that the United States should help Israel against that threat from Iran. So it's an interesting dilemma for the Biden-Harris administration, and that they're trying to say, we don't approve of your policy 100% in what you're doing in Gaza, so stop. But at the same time, we're trying to deter Iran and say, whatever you do, we're going to send an aircraft carrier and an aircraft wing, and an air wing, and all sorts of ammunition and all the reinforcement that Israel needs if Iran conducts a direct attack.
And if you actually flip this on the other side, Rich, for our viewers as well, it could work in a very different way. America could stop sending munitions to Israel. That would allow Israel to then stop its attack on Gaza and then would pressure Tehran not to attack at all, because they would find a way to either stop the war on Gaza or find a ceasefire.
So this is a fascinating question, because it comes down to a basic element of trust. Do you trust in the rationality of the other? If you think that Iran is sincere in its sympathy for the Palestinians, and that the minute that Israel shows a little bit of concession towards the Palestinians, that it will stop its threats and its very, apocalyptic rhetoric with regards to Israel. Let's even say for Al Jazeera viewers that Iran's rhetoric with regards to Israel is pretty apocalyptic, that it's the little Satan, the United States is the great Satan that needs to be destroyed. But let's put that all aside and say, even if you say, okay, they're honest and sincere in their support for the Palestinians, where is the trust? At what point do you build enough trust so that if Israel makes a concession to Iran or to the Palestinian hardline leadership, that they're willing to say, okay, we actually recognize the right of Israel to exist, or we're not going to say that what happened on October 7th and those attacks was legitimate. We have such a fundamental lack of trust between the Israelis and the hardline Arabs and certainly Iran, and between the U.S. and Iran supporters in this region. It's hard to see how that all comes together. So what comes out is a dog-eat-dog, very bitter and very zero-sum game.
Indeed, and it's a mistrust that's been decades in the making, sadly. We'll get more, I'm sure, analysis from you, Rich Outzen, in the coming days. For the moment, thanks so much for joining us from Washington, D.C.
Good to be with you. Thank you.